A lame duck chancellor doesn't get to call the shots anymore. That's a realization rapidly dawning on Germany's Olaf Scholz after the collapse of his government. He had hoped for opposition support to implement at least part of his agenda before a confidence vote to determine his political fate. But that's a favor his rivals across the aisle are not willing to do. They want elections, and they want them now. I'm Nicole Fröhlich in Berlin, and this is The Day.
I already decided that there should be new elections as soon as possible.
The Chancellor was unable to give me a plausible explanation as to why he would only call a vote of confidence in 2 months' time.
We should discuss the date as calmly as possible.
It's his responsibility to ensure that we can get a new government quickly.
I think we will quickly find a good solution for everyone.
Pressure is mounting on Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz to hold snap elections. His coalition government collapsed this week after he fired a top minister. Now, a row has broken out between Scholz's Social Democrats, who want a poll next March, and the opposition CDU, who hope to profit from a much earlier ballot.
Olaf Scholz is in Budapest today, meeting with other EU leaders. Back home, the discussion about new elections is intensifying. Scholz's plan was for a vote in March, following the collapse of his government coalition earlier this week. But that's too late, according to 65% of Germans. In Berlin, opposition leader and Chancellor hopeful Friedrich Merz has also been pushing for earlier elections and an earlier vote of confidence by the Chancellor that will trigger them. Scholz, still in Budapest, has now stated he is open to discuss the election date in Parliament next week.
It would be good if we could now reach an agreement in the Bundestag among the democratic parliamentary groups on which laws can still be passed this year. This agreement should then also be able to answer the question of the right time to call a vote of confidence in the Bundestag, also with regard to the possible new election date.
Im Hinblick auf den möglichen Neuwahltermin.
Scholz's SPD is polling at third place, far off behind the conservative CDU-CSU and behind the far-right AfD. It's possible the Chancellor had hoped to wait until March to win back favor with voters. But that would have meant nearly 5 months as a minority government that would not be able to pass any legislation without opposition support.
Now, this crisis had been a long time coming as differences over economic policy between the Chancellor and his now former finance minister grew until they became unsustainable. And that is something I want to talk about to columnist and author Wolfgang Münchau. He's co-founder and director of Eurointelligence, which provides news and analysis from the EU and Eurozone. His new book is called Kaputt, The End of the German Miracle. It looks at Germany's economic model and what he says is Germany's decline. The book came out this week, just one day after the German coalition fell apart. Welcome to The Day, Mr. Münchau. First up, congratulations on the truly impeccable timing of the release of your book. Were you surprised at all to see the governing coalition fall apart?
I was actually surprised, certainly surprised that it would fall apart on the day of when the book was published. That was clearly not intended, but it certainly... I had expected it to last because I do not think that the three parties are doing themselves any favors. From a tactical political point of view, this will backfire against both against Lindner and against Scholz. But especially for Lindner, I think there is not much of an upside for him and his party.
In your opinion, what were the key factors that got the country here?
This has gone back a long time. I think people always sort of look at economies by looking at GDP figures. And, Germany's GDP is sort of held up. It was very good, especially in the period from 2005 to 2015. And more recently, it's been sort of stagnating a bit. And it's only sort of in the last 2 years that people sort of noticed that something wasn't going right. There was the Russian gas situation. There was the pandemic, the supply chain problems. And, I was looking deeper into this and, I've been covering the story for a very long time. And I've seen Germany becoming progressively more tied to 20th century technologies, taken not very great interest in digital industries. We've seen the car industry going from, global leadership to being a technological laggard in the new field of electric vehicles. I see a general sort of hostility towards digital in general. I see this in schools, at universities, but especially in companies. In the United Kingdom or in the US, the life is more digital than it is in Germany, and that has become a problem now that it's becoming a commercial issue. We're looking, in my book, I was looking at the German financial system, which is still very much based on Sparkassen, on Mittelstand, on funding medium-sized companies, mostly in old technology sectors. There isn't the capital market funding for new sectors, and I think what is happening, especially now with all the geopolitical shifts, the election of Trump, but it goes further. We have the Ukraine war, we have a great geopolitical realignment. The German model was very much depending on that not happening. It was depending on exports, on industrial exports in particular. It was actually depending on surpluses, not just on export, but on generating surpluses, which is a very dangerous strategy, because if you make yourself dependent on surpluses, you reduce the degrees of freedom in your geopolitical action.
So
a lot of things that went right.
Sorry to jump in there, but so what you're saying is that Germany needs a general shift in its economic model. How could that be achieved?
It can be achieved by diversification. I'm not saying that Germany should end sort of what it is doing, but it should open up to new industries. It should not define itself as an industrial economy. And I think that has been the mistake by successive governments. This is not just one political party to define Germany as industry. Germany is a great country for large companies. It's not a great company for small companies. It's not a great company for companies that have no legal departments, that don't focus on regulation. But it's a great company for large companies. Germany has a lot of large companies. The system needs to open up to diversification. That means to other industries, to new entrepreneurs, and to make life easier for them, and also to allow funding for those sectors. A lot of money in Germany. Look at the government's policy on industrial subsidies. A lot of the money went into a few industries, especially semiconductors. And the whole idea behind the semiconductor subsidies was to secure the supply chain of the car industry. So this is all about a lot of the money, a lot of the structures are designed to facilitate life for the large, in this case, the large car companies. Yeah. But the general environment for smaller companies is not nearly as great as it is for the larger ones. So diversification is what I would suggest.
To what extent would you say the current crisis is related to what you're just pointing out?
The current crisis is ultimately based on an economy that is not working. If the economy had rebounded, say last year, as people had expected, and this year, there would have been more money available for the government to bridge its difficulties. But an economy that doesn't grow cannot afford this, and therefore they have to make sacrifices. It is not possible for Germany to fulfill the extreme strictures of the debt brake, the high social funding that this government had accepted, plus the increase in defense spending that Olaf Scholz had promised in his sort of speech on the epochal change, the Zeitenwende that he espoused so strongly. So there is a conflict of interest that has actually now come to the surface. So this political crisis is very much related to this.
Yeah. Germany is, this week especially, not the only country facing change. Donald Trump is moving back into the White House in January. How do you think his economic policies will impact Germany, especially at this current impasse?
Yeah, it's always hard to predict what Donald Trump will do, but he seems better prepared this time. And he has an agenda. He now also has the majorities. This is also different from last time. He has a Supreme Court that is Republican or conservative. He has a majority in the Senate. The House is still not decided yet, but it looks like the House of Representatives will also have a Republican leadership. If that is the case, and at the moment it's leaning in that direction, we are not sure. But if that were the case, then he would govern with a complete majority And one of the things he will do is impose, as he threatened or indicated,
tariffs.
he will impose tariffs on, and a 20% tariff for Germany at a time like this would be an absolute killer. So that would induce German companies to shift more production to the United States. This is, a 20% gap is hard to bridge for Germany. So this will happen. There will be more investments by German companies in the United States to circumvent these tariffs. And it will become a climate which is going to be much harder. So Germany will be forced to make those changes that I've suggested, almost because it's forced on them by the outside world. The system is just not sustainable. It's not just Donald Trump. It's not like it will end when Donald Trump leaves office in 4 years. This is a very persistent change. The Republican or the Trumpism isn't just a short-termist phenomenon. This is very much a sort of this is the real epochal change that is happening.
We'll have to leave it there. That was Wolfgang Münchau of Eurointelligence and author of the recently published book, Kaputt. Many thanks.
Thank you.